Okay. Fine. Erev Tov, welcome back. This is a great third time. This is number 3, yeah? Number three out of five, was it?
That's it.
Okay.
Possible part 2 down the road.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe we'll go in a different direction of the next part.
Thank you to Avi and Bar for hosting us.
Hazaku Baruch.
Cool.
Skala mitzvot. It's always great. Food definitely attracts. Last few shiurim, I've had some good food with me downstairs, and you see the difference when you announce food available. Definitely. I figure we'll start with just a couple of Devar Torahs connected to the parsha that have to do with the concept of marriage. Although it's really, you would think it's really hard to connect. We're talking about the parshiot of the Exodus of Egypt, Yetziat Mitzrayim. Like, what in the world? How can I connect marriage to Yetziat Mitzrayim? Like, this is a story of Pesach, the plagues, the 10 plagues, first 7 in this week's parasha. But actually, I saw a couple of nice ideas that I'll share, and then we'll get into it. Moshe Rabbeinu tells God that he speaks of his reluctance to actually fulfill this mission because he has what he calls aral sefatayim, literally means uncircumcised lips. He had a speech impediment. And Hashem, in a way, was not too happy, but misam peh ba'adam, who's the one that puts a mouth on man? It's me. I can heal. But in the end, he gives in, and he tells Moshe, no problem. Aharon, your brother, is going to be the spokesperson for Paro, and I saw an idea that again, you think about relationships, because this is what this class is about. How relationships thrive specifically when each side recognizes and acknowledges the strengths and the weaknesses of the other to overcome whatever challenges they face. One spouse might feel inadequate, a speech impediment, not necessarily, but it could be some part of their life where they feel they're not as strong as the other one. One spouse might be, I'm great at managing finances, I'm great at budgeting. The other one might be, I'm great at navigating the family challenges with the kids. So instead of focusing on the deficiency, try to focus on, the strengths and the positives that the other person has. Communicate the struggles that you might have, and create a safe space where you can have and communicate, express your emotions and what you're feeling with. And that's really what Moshe and Aaron were able to do. I invite you to listen to my class last night where I really went in depth between Moshe and Aaron, according to Kabbalah a little bit, on what each purpose, who's the purpose of Moshe and Aaron. He had a specific purpose, they had one goal, but they had 2 different missions. And they were both important in getting the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim. You can check that out. I posted the link on the Kehillah WhatsApp chat. But yeah, so that's just one idea that I thought about that very much is applicable to marriage. Another one is, again, Hashem promises Moshe to send a message to Bnei Israel that they're going to be taken out of Mitzrayim, and again that is met with skepticism. Mikotze ruach u'ma'avodah kasha, because the parsha says in this week that the Jewish people were suffering. They were suffering with shortness of breath and a very, very backbreaking work, harshness of labor. And even though Moshe Rabbeinu, at this point, again, he feels discouraged and he thinks maybe they're not going to listen, but he does not really give up in his commitment to fulfilling Hashem's command. And so even in the face of rejection, even in the face of hardship, we have a powerful lesson here of emunah, powerful lesson of faith and determination. And again, marriage as well. Sometimes you face those challenges. You face external pressures, financial pressures, social pressures, illness sometimes, parenting challenges that sometimes can lead to a sense of hopelessness, God forbid, and sometimes couples feel so strained and tired where a lot of parts of their life, both physically and emotionally, feel fatigued. They feel waned. And therefore it's very easy to give up because of that frustration and give up on resolving the issue. So the parasha comes and teaches us, even though the Jewish people are suffering, mikotze ruach ma'avodah kasha, we still got to push, and couples can really draw from that lesson because there is a geulah at the end. No matter what hurdle that you're trying to overcome and what challenges you're facing, you have to know and believe with full faith that Hashem wants the best for all of us, and there's a Geulah at the end, a final Geulah, and we are encouraged to trust into that strength, that the bond that you build together to weather all of life's challenges, present and future, beyachad, together, and then you be successful. So there's a couple of just ideas on the weekly parasha that I think were very much apropos to the discussion that we've been speaking about marriage and relationships. But let's go back into it. We were speaking today. I want to focus still on the subject of intimacy, because that's what we've been talking about. Last time was been more of the laws of intimacy. Today I want to speak about the drive of intimacy, what we call the human sex drive, and we're going to speak about that at length. It's a very powerful thing, the human sex drive. It can be something that is extraordinarily positive, or it can be something that can drag people very, very down to the depths of lowliness. It can lead a person, God forbid, we'll talk about this more at length later on, to pursue another person's spouse, to engage in forbidden sexual relations, to destroy families, to ruin lives in the world. And a person who is caught in the thrall of this urge, of this drive, can lose all discretion and act immorally and irrationally. The Gemara tells us in Masechet Sotah, very famous line by Rish Lakish. He says, En, who is, by the way, a former Roman gladiator who turned Baal Tshuva and became a Jew and became one of the great Talmudic scholars. He says, En Adam over avera ela imken nichnas bo ruach shtut. A person does not commit a sin in life unless a spirit of foolishness enters him. And the proof that he actually brings it from is the pasuk of a sotah, the woman who was accused of being with another man. Ish kitiste ishto. Why is it kitiste? Lashon sin tet hey is the same word as shote, a shtut. Something crazy entered him. So we find people who really want to do the right thing, who marry with every intention of being faithful to that person, but they give space, a little bit of space to the Yetzer Hara, to the evil inclination, and that, once it enters the person, it becomes more and more powerful, and eventually they reach the point, God forbid, where they're ready to break wedding vows, where they're ready to betray their spouse and make their children miserable, throw away their money, destroy their social standing, destroy relationships. And if you actually open up the book of Mishle, written by Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, Proverbs, he actually speaks about this foreign woman who many say is a metaphor for the evil inclination, but he speaks about this foreign woman who's there to entice you, whose talk is smooth, and her course leads to all shades. I'm just taking excerpts of it. And all those people who go to her cannot return and find again the path of life. On a very literal level is you're married and you're finding this other woman, right? And then he goes on to say that be happy with the woman that you have. So again, very literally, it's talking about your spouse. You have a great spouse. You should love her. Look at all the things that she has, and don't fall for the other for the foreign woman. But on a deeper level, this foreign woman is the Yetzer Hara, is the evil inclination, and you should follow your good inclination. Look what you have, and don't seek other things. Here's what he says in the 5th parak. The Torah will keep you from an evil woman, from the smooth tongue of a forbidden woman. Do not lust for her beauty or let her captivate you with her eyes. The last loaf of bread will go for a harlot. A married woman will snare a person of honor. Right? So there's a lot in these verses. But Shlomo HaMelech recognizes that the drive for lust is something very powerful. It can lead to a lot of negative outcomes and consequences. Just off the top of my head, you look at the stories in Tanakh of King David and Bathsheba. Of course, King David had this attraction for this woman, Bathsheba, who eventually married, and he knew that he had to marry her. The problem was that she was married at the time to a man named Uriah, and this moment of an unchecked desire that David could not control led to grave consequences, including it was adultery, but technically, halachically, it wasn't adultery because he signed a divorce document, before he went out to war, but there was certainly a very gray matter for what David did. It led to deceit. It led to murder. Okay, and David repented for this for years, and again that underscores the possibility of teshuvah. Thank God, but at the same time, it doesn't erase the fallout of what took place in that story. We just read about Yosef and Potiphar's wife, Joseph, in Egypt, and his resistance to the seduction of his master's wife. Again, this shows us the strength of Yosef overcoming temptation, sexual temptation, her false accusation, the impending imprisonment that came afterward to illustrate the dangers of that, even when he resisted. And from that moment, it was Yosef's resistance that made him earn the title of Yosef HaTzadik. He was called the righteous because he was able to resist himself. In fact, the part of the body, the reproductive part of the body, which we call Yesod, is in reference to Yosef because of that. The unfortunate story of Amnon and Tamar. Again, one of David's son, Amnon, and Tamar, which was the son of the daughter of Pilegesh. Amnon had an obsession with his half sister Tamar, led him to raping his own half sister. So again, his lust totally blinded him to morality and respect, and we're going to talk about a little bit this later on. We have a mitzvah in the Torah, like I mentioned, the mitzvah of sotah, a suspected adulteress. The Torah's recognition that humans are susceptible to fall, to infidelity, and the measures that are taken to restore trust, all found in Parashat Naso. And then what became a very famous, it's a Jewish story, but turned into a non-Jewish movie, was Samson and Delilah, Shimshon and Delilah. His infatuation with this girl leads him to reveal the secret of his strength. Just because he wanted to be with the girl, he finally told him, well, what is his secret? It was his hair, his Nazirut, and her betrayal demonstrates also the dangers of misplaced trust. All right, so there's a lot going on over here in Tanakh. We see many, many stories. So because the desire and the lust can drag a person so low, there were many philosophers that feel that the best way to reach spiritual heights is to stay as far away from lust, stay far away from sexual desire. And some, we spoke in previous classes, rejected marriage altogether. The priest, they're not married, at least a lot of them are not. And others support marriage only if it's for the purpose of procreation. But really, men and women, if it's not for that purpose, should stay far away from physical desire and lust, because it would be shameful to degrade themselves to such a low level. But the Torah tells us that's not true. That's not the way we look at it. There's nothing shameful about sexual relations between husband and wife. That's how Hashem created people. We are created with from the very beginning of the existence of the world, we're created with this drive, and in fact, there's an element of sanctity to it. Hashem created us with a good impulse and a bad impulse, and He tells us, "I want you to choose the good impulse." The Torah tells us in Parashat Re'eh, right? Re'eh Anochi. Today I call upon heaven and earth to witness against you that I put in front of you life and death, blessing and curse, and I want you bacharta b'chaim. I want you to choose life, so that you and your offspring will give. That's what we're here for. We're here for to choose life, to choose good. So the root of both the impulses is one. And God gave us a free will to direct our impulse towards one or the other. Think about the food that we're eating. A lot of the delicious food right now is amazing, right? But I think everyone would agree that other than the water bottles on this table, none of it is probably healthy, right? You got the pizza, you got the chips, now no one's going to eat anymore. You keep on eating, right? Oh, you got veggies, right? But okay, but a little bit is fine. They said they're allowed to enjoy ourselves a bit. But then you have people that can't control themselves, and they become gluttonous, and then it destroys their health. It just causes people to forget anything that matters to their health, and that's what the food impulse is. And the stronger that impulse gets, the greater the power and the greater the evil. So now, when it comes to sex drive, which is exponentially stronger than a food drive, then especially where you're creating life, because a new life can be born. When that desire is directed towards evil, towards ra'ah, towards promiscuity, towards adultery, there's nothing worse. But on the other hand, when it's directed towards good, then there's nothing holier, because it's for the purpose of love and unity. And that's what the Gemara tells us, that which we quoted this Gemara a few times, that if a husband and wife are worthy, the Shekhinah is with them. God's divine presence is with them. But if not, then fire consumes them. When a couple expresses their natural drives within the sacred, holy framework of marriage, then you have Hashem's presence there. But if they direct their sexual drive towards promiscuity, towards adultery, towards lust, then all they're left with is the fire of their lust. And once that fire dies out, then everything around them dies out as well. Rav Melamed, again, this is who we're learning from in his Sefer, he explains that there are two levels of holiness in a marriage. There's what he calls the basic level and the higher level. The basic level is the couple upholds their vows and basically remains faithful to one another, and they don't betray each other. That is the basic level of marriage. The bare minimum is I'm yours and you are mine, and there's nothing else to talk about. The higher level is when the couple tries to deepen their love and makes effort to please and satisfy one another to the best of their ability, and also to have children and raise them in the life of Torah and mitzvot. And the more mindful and the more intentional they are of this, with having this in mind, the higher they go up in the level of sanctity. In fact, the Ra'avad says that there are 4 kavanot, there are 4 intentions a person can have when he's performing the act of intercourse. 3 of which he calls commendable, and one of them, which is a lesser form of intention, although it's not as commendable, but it's still the mitzvah is being fulfilled. He says the 3 motivations is, number 1, to bring joy and satisfaction to your spouse through sexual intimacy. That's what we spoke about pretty much in number 1 and number 2, class 1 and number 2. We spoke a lot about that. The second motivation is the mitzvah of procreation, to have a child. If you have that in mind, if you have that kavanah when you're having sexual relations, chazak baruch, that's also a very high level. 3, during pregnancy, if a wife is pregnant, then when you have in mind during sexual relations during pregnancy that the child should be good-natured, should be healthy, should be energetic, should be God-serving, yes, you can still have that in mind even after the baby is conceived, then that also is something very commendable. And the 4th motivation, which we said is not as commendable, but still involves fulfilling the mitzvah, is a man having sexual relations with his wife because he senses his drive for sex overpowering him, and therefore he doesn't want to, God forbid, lust over another woman. So therefore, I'm going to have sex with my wife, and that type of intention is the most basic of the marital sanctity ladder, and whereas the first 3 belong to a much higher level. So the basic level of holiness is I'm doing what I need to do to maintain my marriage, to maintain the covenant of my marriage. And even if one spouse might be more interested in satisfying their own drive than giving their spouse pleasure, for example, okay, because I feel this urge and I want to have intercourse, and not so much about making my wife happy or my husband happy, but as long as they don't betray each other, then there's sanctity in the marriage. There is a minimum, a basic level of kedusha in the marriage, and then again, if the husband and wife are worthy, then the Shekhinah is there, the divine presence is there. What does it mean that are worthy? Rashi says on that statement that they walk straight and they walk in the narrow path. What does that mean? That neither of them go astray. They're together, and he's not going with another woman, and she's not going with another man, and that's why the marital bond between a husband and wife is called kiddushin. There's a tractate in Gemara called kiddushin, which is translated as betrothed, related to the word kadosh. Kadosh is sacred, and we actually recite this blessing under the chuppah. The first blessing under the chuppah that the rabbi recites, he takes a cup of wine, the one who is officiating the marriage, and he says, Asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav ve'asalanu da'arasot. Hakadosh Baruch Hu, he forbade betrothed union women to us, and He permitted certain women to us, and this is the woman who He is basically allowing us. And by means of chuppah and kiddushin, blessed are you Hashem, who sanctifies the people of Israel by means of chuppah and kiddushin. So there's element of kedusha here just by simply being married and fulfilling the basic duties of marriage. Even if someone got married to gratify his physical desires, if he still adheres to the laws, the halachic framework of marriage, over time, what will happen, hopefully, is that he will progress towards deeper ahava, deeper love. That his loyalty to halacha and marriage will save him from being unfaithful, and therefore he will be able to deepen the connection and the love and the relationship with his wife, connecting her with great happiness and joy, ascending on those levels of kedusha. Like we said, the higher levels of kedusha is a person who achieves the unity through ahava, total love. For the husband, that means he's constantly thinking of his wife's well-being. And the more he thinks of his wife's well-being, the higher he is in that kedusha ladder. In order for him to want to pleasure his wife, it has to be enjoyable for him too. Even though the primary goal is to bring his wife pleasure. And again, this is something we spoke about last class. And should a conflict arise between his own desires and what his wife enjoys, then he prioritizes her enjoyment over him. And guess what? The same thing applies to the wife. Okay? The more she considers the well-being of her husband, and brings him joy for what he wants, then the higher she ascends in kedusha. So the two levels of marriage reflect the two meanings of the word kadosh, the word sacred. When you look throughout Chumash and you see the word kadosh, whether kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani, you look at all the commentators. How do they translate the word kadosh? They don't call it holy. In English, you say, "and you shall be holy." But what does it mean? Rashi says it could mean one of two things. It could mean A, separate and distinct, or it could be transcendent, eternal, divine. So when a marriage is at the most basic level, the husband and the wife, they separate themselves from all other men and all the women in the world. Okay, and then they're separate, they're distinct. This is us. But kadosh can go on a higher level. Kadosh can be transcendent. It could be eternal. When a marriage is at the higher level, then the intimacy, the intimate connection between the two, it becomes a eternal spark. It becomes a divine spark where Hashem is really, really there present. There are two paths that a couple can take. On a good path, again, that emphasizes love, and an evil path that emphasizes lust. A person that follows the evil path, God forbid, then he cares about himself. He will chase women to satisfy his desires. Here we're not talking about generally a couple, we're just talking in general. And someone who follows a good impulse will learn to love someone, and if they're married, they will learn to love their wife even more, and bring her maximum enjoyment and pleasure. At the very, very least, he remains faithful to her. Someone who lusts and someone who loves, at the beginning, they look the same. You can't tell the difference. But then, over time, their paths diverge, and they go in two separate directions. The lust of someone who follows the evil impulse does not last. And the relationship falls apart and it ends in disappointment. But the person who follows a good path, that is stronger and deeper. At first, the person following the evil path seems to want to do whatever he can for his girlfriend or his fiancée or sometimes even wives. But that is not everlasting. He'll do anything to gratify her desires. He's prepared to go to great lengths to buy her things, spend exorbitant amount of money on her, buy expensive jewelry, give her a lot of compliments, endless compliments. You're happy, I'm happy. But because the primary goal for him is not her, it's himself. It's his self-gratification. then what is he doing? He's using her, because he's all in it for himself. And despite anything that he says, despite any declaration, he would actually prefer not to marry, because he can satisfy his lust without marriage. And even if he does agree to get married, as long as his objective is fulfilling my desires, then he will never truly love his wife. But rather he's just going to exploit her body, and that relationship will grow weaker and weaker and weaker. And in a very, very extreme cases, when you have a man that's driven by lust, a man is even willing to rape a woman to satisfy that impulse. That act of rape is totally devoid of any form of love, bichlal. In fact, when he comes back to his senses, he will hate the victim. And again, we spoke about Amnon and Tamar at the start of the class. That's exactly what happened with Amnon and Tamar. The Navi tells us in Sefer Shmuel, I'm reading you the pasuk, right after he commits the act, he violates her. Vayisna'eha Amnon sin'a gedola me'od. And Amnon hated her a huge, very huge hatred. Like, how much more hatred can it be? Ki gedola hasin'a asher sene'a me'ahava asher aheva. The hatred that he had for her was larger than the love that he had for her, because he didn't really have any love. Vayomer la Amnon kumi lechi. So he told her, get up and leave. This is what happened. Because lust attempts to take the place of love, but once a person comes to his senses and he's sober again, then the rapist realizes how depressed he is and how hollow he is. Instead of loathing himself, he loathes the other person. And unfortunately, this is very much common. Not so much, thankfully, rape is common, but the society out there in universities and colleges of just people just seeking after their own desires, and it's just whether this fraternity, that fraternity, we're going to have this party, and we're going to have this, a big party, what are they called, sexual orgies, where just everyone there just going nuts. They're just going nuts. No control. And I can guarantee you when that night is over, well, no one will admit it, but when that night is over, everyone looks at themselves and they probably feel horrible about themselves. They probably say, what in the world was I just doing? But the next night they'll do it again. But they have that feeling of deprivation, and they begin to loathe everyone who they were with, because it's not love. But on the other hand, if you have a man who cares about the relationship of his wife, and he's careful not to hurt her, and he tries to give her as much joy as he can, and he cares about her well-being, as time goes on, that relationship deepens. And the older they get, the years do not wear them down. In fact, it makes them stronger. The love intensifies, and they become very, very close, infinitely close. You look throughout the Torah, and we see so many mitzvot that are devoted to relationships. The basic, like we said, the basic level of kedusha in a marriage is when a husband and a wife form a halachic relationship and just avoid sexual transgressions with other people. That's what we said. The Rambam, Maimonides, whose yahrzeit was 2 days ago, he lists 37 prohibitions out of 613 in his laws of sexual prohibitions. And it can be divided into 5 categories. You have incest, which is relationships between man and his mother, or man and his daughter, or sister-in-law, or stepdaughter, or step-granddaughter. Most of the sexual transgressions are included in that. Then you have sexual relationships that are forbidden that are not considered incest, such as a Jew and a non-Jew, or a mamzer, which is a bastard and a non-mamzer, or you have bestiality, you have homosexuality, you have adultery, which is sexual relations, of course, with a man and a married woman. You have sexual relations between a man and a nida, a woman who is menstruating. Okay? These are the 5 major categories, and among them, so many different laws. And then, of course, there is rape. That is even more severe. That's a rape of a woman or a man, and certainly a minor. And yes, the Torah talks about the rape of a minor, and that crime usually involves an additional transgression. Not only do you have nida and incest, male homosexual relationship, but you have the fact that you took advantage of a minor. And even when there are no additional prohibitions or transgressions, the effect of the rape victim is so severe, so serious, that the rabbis compare it and they say it's tantamount to murder. So when, it's the Torah tells us for it's like a case of a man murdering someone else. That's how it refers to it. And there's another 17 commandments in the framework of marriage. You have divorce, all the mitzvot connected to divorce. You have the levirate marriage, which is yibum. You have chalitza. Chalitza is what happens if you choose not to marry. If the woman who lost her husband chooses not to marry the younger brother who doesn't have kids. You have the laws of seduction, again, of rape of a young virgin. You have the laws of sotah. So we can't downplay the degree of kedusha, of sanctity, by one who abides by all these rules. Because most of us, thankfully, do abide by these rules. Because there are people that don't. And it has nothing to do with how observant or religious you are. It doesn't have to do with orthodoxy or reform or conservative Judaism, because there are many people who observe Torah and mitzvot who are failing to preserve that covenant. And I say even among the religiously observant, they cannot manage to resist temptation for reasons that, like we just spoke about. They allowed it to come in. They cannot control themselves, and divorce rates are extremely high today. Mainly probably because of that, because people feel, it's a free country, I can do what I want, or there's so much out there, or whether you can blame it on the internet, or blame it on pornography, or blame it on social media and everything that you see. But the people that manage to stay true to that covenant, you got to give them a lot of credit. I'm going to tell you what the Gemara tells us. The Gemara tells us, I believe it's in Masechet Makot. Yes, Gemara Masechet Makot says, Kol ha-Yosef velo avar avera, anyone who sits passively and does not sin, notnin lo sachar ke'oseh mitzvah. We give him a reward as if he did a mitzvah. So now, what's the proof? Rabbi Shimon bar Rabbi Omer, Harehu Omer, the pasuk says, Rak chazak, be strong, levirti achol adam, make sure not to drink blood, not to partake from blood. Ki adam hu nafesh, because the blood is the life. So, what do we learn from here? Uma im adam shenafsho shel adam katzav mimenu. Do you know anybody that wants to drink blood? Nobody wants to drink blood. Okay? Now, maybe some people that are crazy, but generally most people don't want to drink blood. Okay? And we're saying people are they're disgusted of blood. And still, haporesh mimenu mekabel sachar. Someone who sees blood on the table and says, I'm not drinking that, he's going to get reward. Then, gazel, theft, va'arayot, immorality, shenafsho shel adam mitavel la'enu mahamtan, where people have a desire to steal, and they have a desire to be with another woman, and it's really, really powerful. Haporesh mehen alachad kama vekama. If they're able to refrain, all the more so. Sheizke lo uldorotav dorotav arsof kol adorot. That his generation and the descendants until end of time will merit from the fact that you were able to refrain yourself. Unbelievable. Just by doing what you're supposed to do. Kedoshim tiyu, ki kadosh ani Hashem lochem. Be holy. What does be holy? Says Rashi in Parashat Kedoshim. Avoid forbidden sexual relations, because wherever you find sexual boundaries, that's where you find holiness. These are not my words; these are Rashi's words. And therefore, anyone who is faithful to the marriage is also considered holy. In addition to the intrinsic value of sexual relations, we said gives a strong expression of love between husband and wife. The mitzvah also serves as a shield against adultery. And for that reason, unmarried people are more tempted towards sexual transgression and temptation. And they, more than anyone, have to strengthen themselves through Torah study and mitzvot so that they save the power of their love for their eventual spouse. Sometimes it's very difficult to resist. And in that case, you got to study even more. The more he finds the strength to resist the temptation, then the better off he will be. I'm going to tell you a story. It's not my story, it's a Gemara story. Crazy story. In Masechet Menachot, Daf Mem Dalet Amud Aleph. It says, Rabbi Natan says, there is no mitzvah in the Torah, not even a minor mitzvah, which the reward is not enjoyed in this world. That's this world he's talking about. And as for the next world, who knows how great it's going to be. He says, you want proof? Learn this from the mitzvah of tzitzit. What's the mitzvah of tzitzit? Listen to the story.
Sorry, Rabbi, what was the statement?
The statement was that there's not even one minor mitzvah that you won't see reward in this world, for sure in the next world. And he said, if you want proof, look at the mitzvah of tzitzit, the story I'm going to tell you. He says there was a man who was very meticulous in keeping the mitzvah of tzitzit. Okay? So you're probably thinking, what's a big deal, tzitzit? No, it's important. And not everyone wears tzitzit. So for, especially in the summer months, I like to say, it says wearing of tzitzit is an extra layer. Today with minus 20, we'll put all the layers of all the tzitzit I can wear. Right? But when it's hot outside, man, I don't feel like wearing tzitzit. It's a little bit uncomfortable, whatever, the strings hanging down, the shorts, going through the shorts, whatever. But this man was very meticulous of wearing tzitzit. One day, he had this sexual drive. It was overpowering him, and he heard about this Zona. Zona is a prostitute in one of the towns by the sea, who charged 400 gold coins as her wage. That was her wage. So he FedExed 400 gold coins to this woman and arranged a time to meet to be with her. And at the time, he sat at the door and waiting, and the maidservant opened the door of the lady and went to the lady and says, remember that guy who sent you 400 coins? FedEx, this is his name. He's here, he's waiting by the door. She said, let him in. So he comes in. The Gemara tells that she set up 7 beds, 6 of them silver, 1 of them gold. Maybe for 400 gold coins, you get 7 times to be with this woman. Who knows? Anyways, between each bed was a silver ladder. I'll pause right here and just say, every detail of this story has very deeper significance and meaning. I'm just not going into it. The truth is, I didn't do my research to find out why it tells us that each bed had a silver ladder, but I am positive, without any doubt, that there's a reason why this is very probably based on Kabbalah. Anyways, the uppermost bed was the one made out of gold. She climbed up and sat naked on the top bed, and he too started to climb up naked in order to be naked with her. While he was climbing up, his 4 tzitzit hit him in the face. Okay, this is what the Gemara says. And he climbed back down and sat on the ground. And she too climbed down and sat there. She thinking that it was her fault. Either she is not pretty enough, or she's not attractive enough, or she's not sexy enough. So she said, by Rome, this was in the time where the Romans were in control, I am not letting you go until you tell me what flaw you saw in me. This is what she's telling the guy. Why don't you want to be with me? So he said, by the Bet HaMikdash, by the temple service, by the Avodah of Bet HaMikdash, I've never seen a woman as beautiful as you. But God gave me the mitzvah of tzitzit in the context where twice it's written, Ani Hashem Elokechem, the parasha of tzitzit. And this means, Ani Hashem Elokechem, Elohim is God as strict judge. That God will exact punishment in the future. And He will give punishment for the misdeeds, and He will give reward for the good deeds. And at this moment, these 4 tzitziot, these 4 fringes, appear to me as witnesses. They're going to testify against me. So I can't do it. So she said, I'm not letting you go until you tell me what your name is, and which city you come from, and who your rabbi is, and which yeshiva you go to, and where you study Torah. So again, pause right here. This is a yeshiva guy we're talking about here, right? Because he gives her the name of what yeshiva he was in and who's a rabbi that he's studying, and yet he still managed to go travel to another city and send 400 gold coins to be with this prostitute. Anyways, he writes it down. He gives it to her. The Gemara tells us that she divides her property into 3 parts, all of her possessions into 3 parts. 1/3 she gives to the government, so that they would allow her to convert to Judaism. 1/3 to the poor, to atone for all her sins, for all the time she was with a man. And 1/3 she kept for herself, as well as the linens. Why the linens? Again, that's probably something that is the rabbis will explain. She goes to the Bet Midrash, the study hall, the address that this guy gives her. This is the study hall of Rabbi Chia. And she said to him, the Rabbi, tell me what I need to do to convert to Judaism. And he said, my daughter, maybe you have set your eyes on one of the students. And he was concerned that she wanted to marry someone for the wrong reasons, because maybe she couldn't find a husband from one of her own people, or maybe because she wanted the guy's money because he was wealthy. But maybe really the rabbi was worried that she didn't want to convert for the true purpose of converting. She takes out the note and hands it to him, and the note writes the specifics of the incident that demonstrated that she was wealthy and she was desired by many, but she wants this man because of his greatness in spirit. And Rabbi Chia agreed to convert her. And he said to her, Lech v'tikni ma shekanit. Go and collect what you acquired. The same bedding that you spread out for him sinfully, you can now spread out for him lawfully and halachically. And that's the reward for a mitzvah in this world. Alachad kama kama, what the reward is going to be in the next world. So what do we see? A crazy story, right? What do we see? That when the sex drive spills over to something so degrading, it's wicked. But at the same time, when it's expressed within the framework of a proper marriage, it's good and holy. And the rabbi says, you're even going to receive a heavenly reward for this. It's unbelievable when you think about it. The last thing we'll talk about today, sum this all up, again, speaking about the sexual drive, is that it's very important to note that the fulfillment of sexual intercourse with your spouse improves your mental health, improves your physical well-being and your mental well-being. God created humans with different drives, and like we said, the sexual drive is the strongest among all of them. And while not everyone is the same when it comes to this drive, some experience it more intensely, some less, but everybody has it. But someone who doesn't feel it at all, there's a mental handicap there. And for most people, that is just, like we said, is the strongest drive. But if you repress that and distort it, it perverts your psyche, and it makes life very hard. It makes life's purpose almost impossible to fulfill. And that's what the Chachamim said, that any man who is without a wife is not really an Adam. He's not really a man. Because Hashem created man to be Ezer Kenegdo, with his wife, as a helper. And since the drive is so powerful, it's difficult to resist. So Torah had to give us so many mitzvot because of that. I think it wasn't long ago where here in Toronto, there was a man who took his van on Yonge Street and rammed down a whole bunch of people and killed like 15 people, I think. And it came out that the reason why this guy was mentally ill, and as anyone who does something like that would be mentally ill. But the reason why is because he wasn't fulfilling his sexual drive. He couldn't. Every time he tried, he just, it had something to do with that. I definitely remember it had something to do with that. That it was something he couldn't fulfill, and maybe it was a depression of some sort, and he took it out. He wanted to kill like every woman or everything that he saw. So some people feel that when you suppress this inclination, it makes you holier, it makes you more spiritual. But that can backfire, as clear with this guy. That's not the case. It's supposed to be expressed, but it's supposed to be expressed within the framework of halacha. And the Torah wants to give us certain limitations, because if it doesn't give us limitations, then it becomes free-for-all. And then you're a whole bunch of sins. So therefore, every person needs to gauge himself and do self-introspection. If a man needs more time for his drive to be fulfilled in that ona, then don't suppress your needs. But okay, do it more. And the wife has to see that. And if the other way around, so too. But remember, if it's all being driven through the pipe of higher kedusha, of higher sanctity, then it's great. It'll only increase love and it'll only increase joy. And then you can connect with the root of what we're here for, the purpose of life. We said it's the greatest mitzvah you can fulfill. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, in its greatest form, is this. And that's what brings the Shekhinah down here among the husband and wife. So think about that. We went in a little different direction this week. This is something that is natural within every person, both male and female, and it's just a matter of directing it and using the proper channels to make sure that it's done with kedusha. There's a basic level of kedusha, and then there's a higher level of kedusha, and every person is in a different rung of that ladder. But as long as we're aiming to go higher and higher, then you can hope and guarantee that Hashem is going to be there helping you along the way. As if a husband and wife are zocheh, the Shekhinah dwells with them. Thank you for coming, everybody. I'll pause I'll stop the recording, then we can take some questions.